G'day everyone and welcome to Inside Rugby with Mark. This is the preview show and we're going to be talking about round one of this year's Rugby Championship and focusing on the game between the South African Springboks and the Australian Wallabies to be played at Ellis Park in Johannesburg on Saturday. So let's get right into the show. And a quick one for all the newbies to the channel. My name is Mark. I'm a Kiwi rugby fan who's living in Mexico, loving making videos about rugby all across the world because I'm a huge rugby fan. And let's get into the show right now. Yes, I'm talking about South Africa versus Australia. A lot of anticipation around this year's Rugby Championship, a lot of anticipation around this particular game. We've got South African fans saying, well, the Springboks are underdone. They only played against Italy and Georgia. And then we've got other Springbok fans saying, well, we've been playing against each other in practice and training, so we're going to be okay and ready to go. So I'm not too sure which one we take, but I guess one of them is true. Maybe both of them is true. And then on the Wallabies side, well, everybody's saying that the Wallabies have had the better lead into this first round game because they played against the British and Irish Lions. They won that third game. They drew the second one more or less. And they lost the first one. That's how some people are seeing it anyway. But yeah, a lot of people are saying that the Wallabies are coming into this game much better prepared. There's a couple of other things I think we need to take into consideration when we're considering this match. And the first one is the Wallabies haven't beaten the Springboks at Ellis Park since 1968. And you know what's happened since 1968? The Wallabies have won 2 Rugby World Cups. And even those great teams were not able to beat the Springboks there. And this team is not a Rugby World Cup winning team yet. So there's that to consider as well. Yes, they might have had a good series against the Lions. They might be battled hardened. But I'm saying now that I don't think they've got the grunt to go with South Africa for 80 minutes across this particular game. But I'm going to talk about more of that in detail shortly. So Joe Schmidt has named his team for the first test against the Springboks at Ellis Park. And let's start off with the bad news for Australian rugby fans. And the bad news is Rob Valentini's injury is still not good to go. And I'm thinking now that this injury is worse than we're being told about. He's missed quite a few games now and he's not going to be coming back for what I consider to be probably the most crucial game for the Australians in the first round of the Rugby Championship. Starting off this Rugby Championship is going to be pivotal to their momentum, and if they have a good chance against the Springboks, then I think Rob Valentina needed to be there. But in saying that, he wasn't there against the Lions in the third test. Tom Hooper played very well in that game, and we're going to see Tom Hooper back in this team for the Wallabies. So the Wallabies did beat the Lions without Rob Valentini. Are they going to be able to go close against the Springboks? Well, let's have a look at the team that Joe Schmidt has actually selected for this first test. And we'll start off in the backline today. And at fullback, we're going to see Tom Wright. Got lots of great things to say about Tom Wright. I think he's one of the many great rugby fullbacks we've got in the game at the moment. He's great in open play. He's good in the defensive and he can bust a line. He's good under the high ball. He's got a good kick on him as well. Often does a couple of 50-22, so watch out for Tom Wright being one of the key players in the Wallabies team on Saturday. Then moving to the wings, and we've got Max Jorgensen, who's been playing super well throughout the Lions series. And on the other side, we've got Dylan Peach, who I thought played a great game against the Lions in the third test match coming in for that game. And boy, what a size he is, Dylan Peach. You look at him up close, he's a big lad. And I think some people said in the comments that in earlier days he actually played in the forwards, so that's probably why he's got a bit of beef on him. And then moving on to the midfield for the Wallabies, and we're going to see those two again, Joseph Sua'ali and also Len Ekitau. As I've been saying in my previous videos, I think these two are really, really good. I think they're going to grow in their combination together. And up against the world champions this weekend, well, it's going to be a test, isn't it, to see where they're exactly at. I think their defensive patterns are going to be the most important in this game. We saw the Wallabies leaking a few tries against the Lions, and I think they're going to have to clean that up if they're going to have any chance at all against the Springboks team, who of course has an enormous amount of pace and size out wide, and they have the crafty old Mani Lebok as well doing his stuff inside those guys. So we're going to have to see how Sua'ali and Len Ekitau are able to manage their defence, particularly in this game. We know what they can do in an attacking pattern. And then inside them, well, the 9 and 10, this was always going to be an interesting selection as far as I was concerned from Joe Schmidt. And he's gone with Nick White at halfback, and he's gone with James O'Connor at number 10. Now, this is a bit of a surprise to me because I thought he was going to go with Ben Donaldson, but he's brought in James O'Connor, and that's maybe a sign from Joe Schmidt that he just doesn't have the belief in Ben Donaldson to be able to do it for this Australian Wallaby team. So the wily old James O'Connor's coming in, and we're going to see how he goes after getting no game time against the British and Irish Lions. So that's an interesting selection for me, but I also think a good one considering the inventory that Joe Schmidt had to pick from. Of course, Tom Liner and Noah Lolesio are both out with injuries at the moment for the Wallabies, so James O'Connor gets the nod. Now, Nick White coming in, and the first thing that I'm thinking about, which South African forward is going to be the first one to plant one on Nick White, because I think the cheeky little Nick White is going to upset someone early on in this game on purpose, and I think the South African forwards are going to respond in kind. So this is an interesting selection. I think Joe Schmidt wants to rile up the South Africans a bit, and there's no better player in a Wallaby jersey to do that than Nick White. So let's see how he goes starting this game at number 9. So there's the Aussie backline. What do we got? Well, we've got Nick White at 9 causing all sorts of chaos. We've got the unproven James Connor so far this year for the Wallabies. Let's see how that experiment goes. Let's see how the defensive pattern is from the Australian backline. That's going to be a huge thing in this game. And whether or not Max Jorgensen and Dylan Peach can get some opportunities to bring Tom Wright into the game out wide, and the back three for Australia have any sort of impact in this game. Okay, let's have a look at the Wallabies forward pack now that's going to start this game, and we'll start off in the front row. James Slipper is putting on another cap for the Wallabies. Enormous service. I thought he played really well against the Lions. He got his act together there and won a few penalties in the scrum. And then we're going to see Pollard at hooker, and we're going to see Taniela Tupou. Yes, he is going to play in this game after some doubt about his availability. Now, it goes without saying that the front row importance of this game for the Wallabies is going to be enormous. They're going to be taking on a very, very big front row of South Africa and Oxen Chair, Malcolm Marx and Wilco Lowe. So how are they going to be able to go against those three? Well, I think it's an uphill battle. I think it's a Mount Everest for Australia. If they're going to have any chance in this game, then these three guys are going to have to play the game of their lives, and they're going to have to watch out for penalties. So their technical accuracy is going to be watched very much by the referee, I'm sure. As soon as South Africa gets some scrum dominance, they're going to want to see the penalties coming from the referee. So this is an area of the game that we really need to watch at the beginning. Then moving on to the locks for Australia, we're going to see Nick Frost and Will Skelton again. I thought they both played really, really well against the Lions. Nick Frost in particular, a little bit overshadowed by Will Skelton, but Nick Frost did some brilliant things against the Lions. He was great with line-out ball. He secured a lot of good quality line-out ball. And when I did see him in open play, he was very, very good there as well. We've got Will Skelton, of course, and he's the beast of a forward that the Australians are relying on so much, aren't they? So if anything happens to Skelton as far as an injury, or he blows up in the altitude at Ellis Park, it's going to cause all sorts of problems, I'm thinking, for the Australian Wallabies. But he played brilliantly against the Lions. He was a beast. He confronted the Lions forwards, and I expect him to try and do that against the Springboks. But this time, he's not facing Maro Itoje. He's facing Eben Etzebeth and Lut de Haga Jager. So there's going to be a lot of force coming back at him, Will Skelton, this time around. But a great player, a great selection for the Wallabies. Let's see how he goes at altitude. That's where the big question mark for me is. How many minutes can Joe Schmidt and the Wallabies get out of Will Skelton in this first test match? And then moving on to the back three, well, we're going to see Tom Hooper back again. He's replacing Rob Valentini. Hooper, I thought, played exceptionally well against the Lions in the third test match. He really took it up a level. He's going to have to take it up another level to take on the Springboks this weekend. But I'm looking forward to seeing how Tom Hooper goes. On the other side, we've got Fraser McWright again. Fraser McWright played very well against the Lions in the third test match, but he's going to have to take it up another level with the Springboks team. And that's something this entire forward pack from the Wallabies is going to have to focus on. This is not the Lions pack. This is the Springboks pack. This is the world champions. And they're going to be a confrontational bunch to say the least. So they're going to have to make sure that they raise their game. And then at number 8, we've got Harry Wilson, who I thought did a couple of silly things during open play in those test matches against the Lions, but overall I thought his leadership was very good. He is a good number 8. He leads this team around the field very well, and I expect him to raise his game against the Springboks, as every single one of these Australian Wallabies are going to have to do. So there we go. That's the pack that's going to start the game for the Wallabies. What are my thoughts and concerns around it? I think James Slipper is going to be targeted in that front row, and I also think Pollard is going to be as well. I think Taniela Tupou might be able to do his job for a while. He's got to get the technical aspects of his game right. That's sometimes where he falls off, and we saw a lot of penalties against the Lions in one of the test matches, and then he came back in the third one and did a great job. So we're going to have to see how Taniela Tupou does in that particular area. Line out ball is going to be crucial for the Wallabies, and Nick Frost and Will Skelton are going to have to do their best. But I also want to see variations in line outs from the Wallabies. They did that against the Lions. It worked for them on a number of occasions. They got good quality percentages of line out balls, and I expect them to try and do the same to disrupt the defensive work of the Springboks in those line outs. And then of course the loose forward battle is going to be tremendous in this game. Winning the breakdown in most games is absolutely crucial. And of course the Springboks have got their lightning ones with Sia Kolisi at number 8 this weekend. So we're going to have to see how he goes, along with Peter Steph du Toit and Marco van Staden starting this game. This is a big task for the Aussies once again. But if they're going to have any chance in this game, they're going to have to take on these 3 guys. Okay, another area of the game that's going to be crucial is the bench, of course. So let's have a look at who Joe Schmidt has put on the bench. Okay, so looking at the bench for the Wallabies, and Joe Schmidt has gone for 6-2. So we probably expected that. Pretty little chance against the Springboks if you don't do that these days. So let's have a look at who he selected. And in the front row that's going to be coming on, it's Payanga Mosa, it's Angus Bell, and it's Zane Nongor. 3 really good players. Angus Bell's the standout for me. He's very good in open play. But you know what? It's going to be in the set piece where these 3 are going to be super tested when they come on. So forget about the open play. We want to see these guys do their job when the set piece structures around, but also line out throwing. That's going to be a key in the second half for this Wallabies team. And then the other 3 that they've selected to come on, we've got Jeremy Williams, which is a great replacement. He's tall, he's good around open play. He'll win some line out ball for the Wallabies. We've got Langy Gleeson, who's brilliant around open play as well, but he's a great jackler, and he'll get in there and get a lot of ball for the Wallabies. And then we've got Nick de Krempny, who is a young guy who's come into the Wallabies this year and played a very good game against the Lions. So there we go, 6 great replacements for the Wallabies. How great are they going to be on the day? Well, we're going to find out on Saturday. But they're going to have to bring their A game if they're going to have any chance of bringing this one home in the second half for the Wallabies. Okay, so then looking at the bench for the back line, and we've got 2 players, of course. Tate McDermott, who we've seen come on during the Lions series and done a fantastic job, in my opinion. I would have liked to see him start this game, but I can understand why Joe Schmidt has put Nick White in there to cause a bit of chaos in the first half, and see what Tate McDermott can do if the South Africans are getting tired in the second half. And that's a big if, of course, if this South African team is going to get tired. And then the other back to come off the bench is going to be Andrew Callaway, more of a utility player. So if the Wallabies do have a problem with any injuries during the game, then Callaway can carry a couple of positions. And for me, he gets the nod ahead of someone like Ben Donaldson, absolutely, for the Wallabies. So there we go. That's the Wallabies team that's going to play this weekend against the Springboks. So what's going to happen in this game? Well, I think, as most people are expecting, the Wallabies are going to stay in it for a little while. That is, unless South Africa get on a roll in the beginning. We could see the Springboks shoot out to 15, 17 points within the first 20 minutes of this game. If we see the likes of Ardensa and Edwill van der Merwe get some ball and get outside the Australian backline and cause their defence some problem, then we could see some early tries from the Springboks. We could also see Grant Williams and Manie Libbok causing all sorts of problems to the Wallabies early on. So that's one of the scenarios that could happen. The other one is that it's a bit of a dogfight for the first 20 minutes or so as both groups of forwards try and get some dominance. If that's the case, we're going to see a little bit of kicking in this game, and we're going to see some territory played, because once the Springboks get down into the Wallabies half, I think it's going to be all on in terms of trying to get their backline away. We've got players like Esterhazen that can get in there for the Springboks and get over the advantage line, but then the power and speed they've got out wide is phenomenal, and I would expect to see Fassi and I'd see Ardensa having a field day this weekend against the Wallabies. Up front, it's going to be really interesting. I think there's going to be some really interesting battles. Let's see how De Jager and Etzebeth take on Will Skelton and Nick Frost. That's going to be one of the battles we need to watch. But up front, that's where it's really going to be. And as I said, Oxenchair, Malcolm Marks and Wilco Lowe are going to take it to this Wallaby front row. So I do expect the Springboks to get some scrumming dominance in this game. That's going to lead to penalties. That's going to lead to territory. That's going to lead to possession. And then I think the Springboks can do their work and magic from there. That's how I see some of this unfolding for this particular game. I also see this Wallabies defence being a little bit fragile. I don't think they're going to be able to fix it overnight. We saw it against the Lions at times. It was very, very porous. And I think we're going to see the Springboks exploit that to the nth degree. Now, I'm making this video on Thursday morning here in Mexico, and as yet Rassi hasn't changed his team to mirror the 6-2 split. So we'll see whether he brings in R.G. Schneemann as he has threatened to do in the press conference, or whether that was just a bit of banter from Rassi and he's happy with the team that he's going to put out on the field against this Wallabies team. So on paper we're saying the Springboks can't lose this game really, because they've got too much of an advantage with the altitude in Johannesburg. They're fresher than the Wallabies, and I'm thinking freshness over battle harden is going to be an important factor in this particular game. So watch out for that particular scenario. Discipline is going to be a huge thing. So is that scrum battle going to lead to penalties and therefore territory and possibly points? If Australia are able to win a couple of penalties from scrums, maybe then they can get a few points on the board. But I would back the Springboks getting more of an opportunity to do that. The Australians need to nail their lineouts. As we saw against the Lions, they were very good. So variation is going to be the key here, and that's what I'm going to be looking at. And then we've got to talk about the rush defence. So is Len Ekitau and Joseph Sua-Ali going to be able to get time and space to be able to create some of their magic, or are the Springboks going to be able to shut them down? And that's going to be when the Wallabies need to put a good kicking strategy into play. Maybe a couple of chip kicks over the top of the South African defence, turn them around, get them running back towards their own goal line, and then use the pace of the likes of Tom Wright, Max Jorgensen and Dylan Peach to come in and cause problems for the South Africans. Every time the Wallabies get down into the red zone of the Springboks, they need to score points in this game. They're not going to get many opportunities, I believe, so every time they do get down there, they're going to have to keep the scoreboard ticking over. That's the only way I see them keeping in touch with the Springboks in this game. But then we've got to talk about the last 20 or 30 minutes, and when the Wallabies start running out of gas, and I'm pretty sure they're going to, is that going to be the time when the South Africans put the pedal to the metal? And is that when we see Rassi bringing in the changes? So I think around 50 to 60 minutes in this game is going to be absolutely vital. Looking at who scores before half time, we've all seen it so many times in a game of rugby that team that scores right on half time has a bit of an advantage and momentum going into the second half. We saw the Wallabies getting run down by the Lions in that last test match. They didn't quite get there in the end. But is that something the Wallabies are going to be able to do? If by chance they've got a lead, are they going to be able to defend it in this game? I think that's an area of concern as well for me with this Wallabies team. However, if South Africa get in front of this game, they get some momentum, they're going to be very, very hard to chase down. So it's going to be about the Wallabies trying to get ahead in that first half. I think points on the board are going to be vital for them in terms of their belief and their ability to keep the Springboks out for a little bit of time. But I just think the Springboks want to play an open game of rugby. That's why we're seeing Grant Williams and Manny Lebok in this team for the Springboks. And as a result of that, I think their weapons outside are going to see quite a bit of ball, and that's going to be a problem for this Australian defensive line. So there we go. Those are my thoughts around the first test match that's been played between South Africa and Australia at Ellis Park in Johannesburg. Round one of this year's Rugby Championship for these two teams. It's going to be an almighty battle, but I'm picking South Africa to win this game. And if they get off to a good start, then I think they can win it by quite a healthy margin. Australia's only chance is to get points on the board early, try not to get penalties in the scrums against them, That's only going to give South Africa the momentum, and from then Australia needs to play to their DNA, play the running game, go out wide and try and get around South Africa in the outside channels. Put the ball behind the South Africans, get them to go back and to do a lot of defensive work, a lot of tackles, try to get them a little bit tired, and then try and catch them out with great plays from Ikitau, Sua Ali and the boys out on the wings. Now, I'd love to hear your views and opinions on that, particularly from South African fans. Do you sit on the side of the fence where the South Africans haven't had enough warm-up games? Those two games against Italy and Georgia weren't enough in your opinion? Do you think the freshness of the Springboks is going to be something they're going to enjoy more against a battle-hardened Wallaby team? And do you think the Wallabies coming into this with their tails held high after winning against the British and Irish Lions is going to be the difference they need to pull off their first win at Ellis Park since 1968? That's the big question mark for me. I'd love to hear your views and opinions in the comments. Okay, that's it for the preview show for the Springboks versus the Wallabies. So let me know all your thoughts. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Stick around on the journey. I'll be back again soon when the All Blacks and Argentina name their teams, and I'll do the preview show for that game that's taking place in Argentina on Saturday as well. Until then, stay well, stay safe, keep enjoying your rugby across the world, and thank you for watching my videos here on Inside Rugby with Mark. Until next time, it's adios from beautiful Cancun in Mexico. Bye for now.